Am I the asshole for telling my wife the lock on our daughter's door stays on until her brother and his daughters move out of the house? My daughter asked me why her own cousins felt more like burglars than family. That question sat with me for weeks before I finally put a lock on her bedroom door. This is that story. My name doesn't matter much for this story. What matters is my daughter, Zoe. She's 16. Quiet kid, the kind who keeps her room organized. Saves her allowance instead of blowing it and doesn't ask for much. If you know a kid like that, you know how rare it is these days. About 10 months ago, my brother-in-law Sammy went through a divorce, ugly one. From what my wife told me, he lost the house in the settlement, and with nowhere else to go, he asked if he could move in with us for a while. He's my wife's brother, and she wasn't about to say no. So I didn't push back either. Family helps family. That's how I was raised. And honestly, it's how I still think. A couple of months after that, Sammy brought his twin daughters to live with us too. Olivia and Sloane, both 18. They'd been staying with their mother until then, but that arrangement fell apart for reasons nobody fully explained to me. One day, it was just Sammy in our guest room. The next, it was Sammy and 2 more teenagers under our roof. Our house isn't small, but it isn't built for 6 people either. We made it work. We converted the office into a bedroom for the twins. We rearranged the garage. My wife was thrilled to have her brother close again, and honestly, so was I. At first, Zoe and her cousins weren't close before this. They'd see each other at holidays, and that was about it. But they got along fine on the surface. No fights, no drama. Just polite distance. The way teenagers who don't know each other well usually are. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I like Sammy. I like his daughters. This isn't a story about hating my in-laws. This is a story about boundaries, and about what happens when nobody else in a house seems to think boundaries matter. It started small enough that I almost didn't notice a pattern forming. A few weeks after the twins moved in, Zoe came to me holding a phone case. Hers, she said, but it had gone missing 3 days earlier. She found it in Olivia's room, being used like it had always belonged there. When Zoe asked for it back, Olivia acted confused, like she didn't understand why it was a big deal. "It's just a phone case," she said. "I'll get you a new one." That should have been the end of it. A misunderstanding, easily fixed. Except a week later, it was a hair straightener, then a school laptop charger, then an entire outfit Zoe had picked out for a school event, gone from her closet the morning of, only to reappear crumpled in the twins' laundry hamper. That night, I brought it up with my wife. The first time it happened with a laptop charger. I remember exactly what I said to her. Zoe needs that for school. She can't just lose access to her stuff because someone else decided to borrow it without asking. My wife's response was almost automatic. They're girls. This is what teenage girls do. I did the same thing with my cousins when I was that age. I didn't love that answer, but I let it go. I told myself it was a phase, that the girls were adjusting to a new house and new rules, and that things would settle down once everyone got comfortable. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. I did talk to Olivia and Sloane directly, more than once. I wasn't harsh about it. I sat them down one evening and explained calmly that Zoe's room and Zoe's things were hers, and that even in a shared house, some things need to stay off limits without asking first. They nodded along. Sloane even apologized. For about a week, things were quiet. Then it started again. Zoe isn't a kid who spends money easily. She's careful with it, more careful than most adults I know. So when she told me she'd been saving up for a specific makeup kit for over a month, I understood what that meant to her. It wasn't about the makeup. It was about earning something on her own and having it be hers. The kit cost $60. Not a fortune, but not nothing for a 16-year-old, working through babysitting money and birthday cash. She finally bought it online, waited for it to arrive, and the day it showed up, she was happier than I'd seen her in weeks. She showed it to me before she even opened the box fully. It looked less like makeup and more like a small paint set. All these little compact shades lined up in rows. 3 days later, I heard her crying in her room. I knocked, and when she opened the door, she was holding the kit, or what was left of it. Someone had gone through every shade, mixed colors together that were never meant to touch, left fingerprints and smudges across compacts. That had been pristine less than a week earlier. Zoe doesn't know a lot about makeup, and neither do I. But even I could tell this thing was ruined. It wasn't going back to what it was, she told me. She found it sitting on her bed like that. No note, no explanation, no apology. Just the wreckage of something she'd worked a month to afford. I asked her who she thought did it, and she said Sloane, because Sloane had asked to borrow some makeup 2 days earlier. And Zoe had said no. She'd said no clearly. She remembered saying no. I went straight to my wife with this. I wasn't calm about it, not entirely, but I tried to be. I told her what happened, showed her the kit, and asked what she wanted to do about it. Her answer was that she'd have Sloane apologize. That was it. An apology for destroying something her daughter had saved. A month's worth of money to buy something that couldn't be replaced by walking into a store and grabbing a $15 drugstore version. I want to be honest here. That's the moment something shifted in me. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. I realized that no matter how many times this happened, the response from my wife and from Sammy was always going to be some version of "that's just what teenage girls do," or "we'll talk to them." Nothing ever actually changed. Nothing ever actually stopped. That same week, I noticed Zoe moving things out of her room. Not obviously, but I caught her carrying a small box down to the garage, and when I asked what she was doing, she admitted she was trying to hide her more valuable things somewhere the twins wouldn't think to look. Her school laptop, a necklace her grandmother left her, a few textbooks she'd need for finals. That was the moment I decided the situation had gone past talking. My 16-year-old daughter was hiding her belongings in her own home, from her own family, because nothing else had worked. So I went out and bought a lock for her door. It wasn't anything elaborate. A simple keyed lock, the kind you can install yourself in under an hour. I put it on Zoe's door that weekend while everyone else was out running errands. I gave her the only 2 keys, one for her, one for me in case of emergencies. When Sammy and the girls got home and noticed it, the reaction was immediate. Olivia and Sloane were, in their words, extremely upset. Sammy pulled me aside almost as soon as he saw it and asked what exactly I thought I was doing. I told him the truth. I told him about the phone case, the charger, the outfit, and finally the makeup kit. And I told him this was the result of months of the same pattern repeating with no real consequence. His response has stuck with me since. He told me his daughters weren't thieves. He said it's completely normal for girls, the same age, to borrow each other's things, that this is just how teenage girls operate, and that I was overreacting to something harmless. Then he said something that genuinely surprised me. He said Zoe could easily replace that makeup kit with a $15 version from Walmart, and that she shouldn't have been buying expensive adult makeup in the first place. He suggested my wife needed to correct what he called a defect in Zoe's personality, this apparent need to seem older than she actually is. Then he told me I was babying her, overprotective, enabling her too much by putting a lock on her own bedroom door in her own house. I told him plainly that this conversation was between me and my wife, not between me and him. He didn't love that answer, but he backed off, at least in that moment. My wife did not back off. That night, once the house had quieted down, my wife came to me about the lock. She wasn't calm. She told me I'd embarrassed her in front of her brother and her nieces. She said the lock made it look like we didn't trust them, like we thought of them as criminals instead of family. She said I was supposed to treat Olivia and Sloane like my own daughters, not like suspects. I asked her a simple question. If I was supposed to treat them like my own daughters, why hadn't she asked them to treat Zoe's things the way they'd want their own things treated? Why was the expectation only flowing in one direction? She didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she demanded I take the lock down. Immediately, that night I told her no. I told her the lock stays up until Sammy and his daughters are no longer living in our house. Not because I hate them, not because I think they're bad people, but because nothing else had worked. And my daughter deserved one space in her own home, where she didn't have to worry about coming back to find something broken, stolen, or ruined. That's when things escalated. She accused me of implying we should kick her brother and nieces out onto the street. She said her family would hate me for even suggesting it. I reminded her of something at that point that I think she'd conveniently forgotten. When Sammy needed somewhere to go after his divorce, her own parents, her own family had the option to take him and the girls in. They said no. They didn't have the room, didn't have the patience, didn't want the disruption to their own lives. We were the ones who said yes. We were the ones who reorganized our entire house, gave up an office, absorbed the extra grocery bills, the extra noise, the extra everything, without a second thought, because that's what you do for family. So I told her if anyone in her family deserved blame or shame for this situation, it should start with the relatives who refused to help in the first place. If they'd stepped up, we wouldn't be dealing with any of this disruption in our home at all. She didn't have a response to that either. She just walked away. In the days that followed, the house turned cold in a way I hadn't experienced before. Sammy stopped speaking to me beyond what was strictly necessary. Olivia and Sloane wouldn't make eye contact with Zoe or with me, even at the dinner table. Conversations that used to flow normally turned into short, clipped exchanges, everyone very carefully avoiding the subject sitting in the middle of the room. My wife was the hardest part. She wasn't yelling anymore, but she'd gone quiet in a way that felt heavier than any argument. She'd answer basic questions, pass the salt, confirm plans, but the warmth was gone. I could tell she was upset in a way that went beyond the lock itself. I think, somewhere underneath it, she felt caught between her brother and her daughter, and she resented me for forcing that choice into the open. Zoe noticed all of it too. She's a smart kid, and she picked up on the tension immediately, even though nobody explained the full situation to her. She asked me one night, very quietly, if it was her fault that everyone was upset. I told her, as clearly as I could, that none of this was her fault. She didn't ask anyone to move in. She didn't ask her privacy to be ignored for months. She didn't ask for her savings to be wasted on something that got destroyed within days. The only thing she'd done was want a locked door. The same basic privacy most people take for granted. That conversation confirmed something for me. Whatever tension this caused in the house, whatever silent treatment I was getting from my wife's side of the family, I wasn't going to regret protecting my daughter's space to feel safe in her own home. As of now, the lock is still on Zoe's door. Sammy is still looking for a place of his own, though progress has been slow given his financial situation after the divorce. My wife and I are still working through this, mostly through short, tense conversations that don't fully resolve anything yet. I've thought a lot about whether I handled this the right way. I keep coming back to the same conclusion. A lock on a door isn't an accusation. It's a boundary. Boundaries exist because trust was tested and came up short repeatedly. Over months, not once. If Olivia and Sloan had respected Zoe's things from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. The lock didn't create the distrust in this house. It was a response to distrust that already existed. I also think about what Sammy said about Zoe needing to lower her standards to a $15 makeup kit instead of something she genuinely wanted and saved for. I can't get past how backwards that logic is. The problem was never what Zoe chose to buy with her own money. The problem was someone else deciding they had a right to use it without asking, and then ruining it without consequence. I don't know how this fully resolves. I don't know if my wife's family will ever see this the way I do, but I know my daughter finally sleeps without worrying about what she'll find missing or broken when she gets home from school. And for me, that's worth the silent treatment, worth the tension at dinner, worth whatever judgment comes from people who weren't in that house watching this pattern repeat for months before I did anything about it. So, would you have installed the lock? Would you have held your ground the way I did? Or do you think there was a better way to handle this without turning the whole house against each other? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you've got a story of your own you want told, send it my way. I'm always looking for the next one.